This is Île-les-Palmiers on the south coast of France, one of the oldest resorts on the Côte d'Azur. Queen Victoria was frequently amused here at the turn of the century. And certainly one of the things that attracted her then, and attracts thousands today, is the beautiful palm tree-lined squares and streets that give the town its name. But in January 1985, the south of France was hit by the worst winter for 40 years. Palms are extremely sensitive to the cold, and in Hyères, thousands died. These short, shoulder-high palms are the replacements. They still look a bit ragged, but eventually they'll blend in with the more elegant survivors, which date back to Queen Victoria's visits. Over 2,000 palms have been replaced so far, but only because one local nursery found a way of breeding palms quickly and efficiently. Palm trees aren't particularly easy to cultivate. In fact, the seeds from this rare blue palm take 2 years just to germinate, because they need to go through a double cycle of dry, hot summers and mild, wet winters to bring them to life. And even then, 95% of them fail. Well, here they're accelerating nature's way and reducing the germinating period from 2 years to 2 months. By baking the seeds at exactly 39 degrees Celsius, they found they could condense a summer into 48 hours. They then soak the seeds in water for another 48 hours and repeat the cycle of artificial seasons once more. That softens the seeds' thick, impermeable skins, enough to let through oxygen and water, and they bring the dormant embryos inside to life. At this stage, they're transferred to warm, sterile cultivation chambers until the roots appear, which with the blue palm takes about another 6 weeks. Once they've been planted, the shoot unusually grows directly off the root, and the seed stays on the top where it eventually shrivels away. The result of all this fastidious nurturing is impressive. Not only have they greatly condensed the germination period, but 50% of the seeds sprout, rather than 5% in the wild. As they continue to grow, more care and attention is lavished upon them. And as you can see, they've got a complete production line going here, and these are just about ready to branch out into the outside world. The blue palms they're replanting are particularly resistant to the cold, so even if people are skiing here again this winter, they shouldn't have to start all over again in the spring.
30 years of electronic miniaturization have brought us from this kind of technology to this. And now it seems the mechanical world is poised on the brink of a similar shrinking revolution.
By 2020, I expect that we'll see great progress toward the construction of things, molecule by molecule, treating molecules as building blocks for making everything from super strong materials to microscopically small computers.
Dr. Eric Drexler works at Stanford University in California, and his dreams of molecular engineering have put him in the vanguard of what's being called the invisible revolution. But how far do we have to go before his dreams might be realized?
Well, it's already possible to machine with incredible detail on a microscopic level. For example, this tiny speck in the centre of that glass is actually a copy of the Lord's Prayer engraved onto that glass. Now, I'm just going to slip it underneath this microscope. We'll look on the monitor. You can see the words there. And in fact, each letter is only 1/100th of a millimetre high. Employing that kind of precision, mechanical components like these gear wheels that are as fine as the point of a needle are now being made in a number of labs around the world. They'll eventually work with tiny motors, possibly like these electromagnetic resonating cones, or maybe like this tiny electrostatic motor. It's only 6/100ths of a millimetre across. Now, electrostatic motors have never been widely used because on this scale, it's hard to get big enough static charges to drive the motor with much power. But if the components are very small, then even a tiny charge will do the trick. At the moment, Only about a dozen of these microscopic motors exist, but by the end of the decade, they're likely to be used for all kinds of mechanical systems, from toys to implantable blood pumps for helping out diseased veins.
But for Eric Drexler, even these micro-wonders smack of heavy engineering. For him, the future lies with nanotechnology. It's a technology that begins from a very different point.
For one thing, rather than starting with large-scale structures and striving to make them smaller and smaller and smaller, nanotechnology will involve beginning with the smallest objects that exist, starting with individual molecules, and putting them together in a controlled way to build larger and more complex structures, to build more complicated and capable systems. Also, today's semiconductor technology in laptop computers, for example, relies on electronics, on shifting around patterns of charge to do computation. The kind of nanotechnology I'm talking about would resemble actually more this toy motor and gear combination. It would involve solid, physical, moving parts, such as, for example, gears, where the individual teeth were single atoms, where the bearing which the gear turns about is actually a single bond between two atoms, as shown in this ball and stick model here.
Molecules normally react together chemically on a large scale. Assembling atoms and molecules precisely one by one is a more mechanical approach, and new molecules could be designed with this in mind. For instance, here there's not only a mechanical bearing, but also atomic gear teeth, which can then intermesh with other similar molecules. But even if we could engineer on this kind of scale, what would we do with those molecular engines?
Nanotechnology should eventually enable us to build computer-controlled devices that are smaller than, say, a red blood cell circulating in the bloodstream. If you can do that, then it should be possible to build devices that can, perform surgery on a single cell, that can recognize viruses circulating in the bloodstream and destroy them, or that could identify fatty deposits on the wall of an artery and take those deposits apart and flush them away. These are things that we can look forward to in the long term from nanotechnology.
Using these techniques, Drexler and his supporters reckon we'll be able to slow down aging with cellular surgery, clean up pollution by building up plant-like devices to destroy toxic molecules. We could even feed ourselves by growing meat without animals. Imagine a kitchen, a machine that would sit there assembling the molecules to make fresh meat and vegetables just as you require them. Science fiction? Well, Drexler's ideas are fast gaining ground, and many believe they could indeed be the truths of the future. Howard.
The icing on the cake. Always been a bit of a sticky business, this. Making a cake really personal, like somebody's face, this is Peter, takes hours and hours of professional skill, which you don't have. Frustrated by all this effort, a Venezuelan baker set out to develop the fully automatic cake decorator. It's a combination of a camera, a computer, and a robot paint sprayer, and it does all the work for you. Just bake a cake, and that dream of turning Peter into a bit of almond icing can become reality. Well, all I did was put the picture under the camera, which scanned it into the computer. The computer digitizes the image, turning it into a numerical code, and then converts all the different tones to black and white. And using this touch screen, as you can see, I've actually added to the picture there a little more detail to make Peter even more lovely than ever. But you know, you can eat more than just pictures of your friends. The computer itself contains hundreds of its own images and messages that you can choose from, and you can easily add more of your own. For instance, we've drawn this specially designed Tomorrow's World logo, so I think we'll put that on as well. And all I have to do now is put the cake in the right position so that the design goes in the right place, and tell the robot to do the rest. Now, to produce the picture, it uses these air brushes to spray on minute quantities of food dye. Now, there's enough dye in each of these spray heads for about 5 cakes, and you've got a choice of 14 different colours to choose from. And there it is. The beginnings of a completely edible Tomorrow's World cake. Now, it's going to take a couple of minutes to complete, so we'll come back and have a look at it later.